Education is changing faster than ever. We can't ignore the research that shows instructional practices rooted in evidence lead to better outcomes for students and stronger school communities. At Educational Innovation 360, we partner with educators and leaders to elevate teaching through personalized instructional coaching, data-driven professional development, and student-centered teaching strategies.
From Ed Consulting, we bring deep expertise in strategic planning, organizational transformation, and leadership development, ensuring the whole system is aligned for success, equity, and sustainable improvement.
Together, our goal is simple: to support schools and districts in transforming learning so that every student and educator can flourish. Stay informed, stay innovative, stay student-centered. Subscribe to Educational Innovation 360's YouTube channel to get the latest news and updates.
Marty Wrightington, PhD, Waterford, Connecticut, is the founder and CEO of PD Monster, where she leads high-impact professional development for educators across the country. Marty holds a doctorate in school psychology from the University of Connecticut and a BA in psychology from Bryn Mawr College, along with certifications in both school psychology and school administration. With over 20 years experience as a school psychologist, administrator, and consultant, Marty brings deep expertise and real-world insight to every session she leads. Known for her engaging style and practical approach, she is passionate about helping school teams shift from theory to action so they can see real results. Her trainings are designed to spark new thinking, build capacity, and empower educators to create lasting change. Impressive. And your surroundings in Maine are impressive as well.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, just moved here and I'm really loving living in the woods. So yeah, it's all good.
Great. Well, tell us how you got to where you are now. What's your North Star? What led you into school psychology and psychology in general?
Yeah, so I mentioned to you when we were chatting before that I think my hobby is people, right? I just love connecting with people. I love talking. I'm a talker. And so psychology was just kind of a natural fit. I mean, I do think it's one of the crazy things humans have done in the world that we have 17, 18-year-olds decide what they're going to do for life, right? And so, but I guess I did because it stuck. So I decided to, study psychology in undergrad. And I had never heard of school psychology. I didn't know what a school psychologist was. And I was after college was looking for careers. And I kind of quickly found out there's not a whole lot you can do in the mental health field with just a bachelor's in psychology. And so I knew grad school was in my future. Mm-hmm. And as I was, kind of exploring grad school psychology, presented itself to me and one thing led to another. And that's where I ended up.
Here you are. Well, let's talk about your title for a moment. Why most PD fails and what to do instead. So what led you to that conclusion? Meaning why it fails and what to do instead. What is it that we should do instead of the way we've been presenting and using PD? Yeah,
I mean, I think I built this company mostly due to my own frustrations with professional development. Like I am a self-proclaimed nerd. I love learning. I love reading. I love going to trainings. And I just felt so frustrated throughout my career as both a school psychologist and a school administrator that professional development was so bad. It was just, we hold, I talk about this all the time. We hold teachers accountable for relevance, rigor, engagement. I mean, we could talk about all the buzzwords, right, that we've all heard for decades in our careers. And then I felt like when we were the students, when we were supposed to be learning, nobody cared about instructional design. Nobody cared about engagement. Nobody cared about relevance. And it just wasn't good. And so I always, found myself sitting in the back of the cafeteria with my, work friends and just doodling. And this was like pre-smartphones, right? So, doodling. And sometimes I would count up the slides that the presenter handed out and I would time them. And then I would take an average, all right, they're going about 4 minutes per slide. And then I would sometimes take bets at the table of what time do you all think we're going to get out?
Kidding.
Right. And I was just, and so that, right. I take some responsibility for that. That wasn't maybe very mature of me. But I also
we got 4 bullets here. We better get started on them so we can hear in detail about how and why PD fails. So our bullets are why most PD fails, what everyone hates about PD, the components necessary to create lasting change, and finally, consider out-of-the-box PD. Where would you like to start?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'll start with why does it fail, right? And I think there's probably a lot of reasons, but I think some of the reasons that it fails is, first of all, nobody learns from a one and done, right? And when we think of PD, what do you think of? I think of a person standing at the front of the cafeteria or the auditorium or wherever you are, right, with the whole staff in there. But that's not the only type of PD there is. And I think when we only rely on the one and dones, we don't see change. We've put a check mark on the day, right? We've said, okay, we kept the staff busy for today, right? Because I'm wearing both my participant hat and my admin hat and my presenter hat, right? I'm thinking about all the different all those different perspectives. So, when we do those one and done PDs, we bring in an expert and they talk about something, and then everyone goes back to the way they were doing things before, because that's not really how we learn, right?
Let's talk about how people learn then.
Yeah. So there's something
particularly regarding andragogy, how adults learn. what can you tell us about how adults learn that would improve the effectiveness of professional development?
Yeah. So I think connection is a huge thing, right? Like connecting what we're learning, whatever's on the agenda for that day, how does it connect to what we're already doing? Because I think educators are so sick of the new thing, right? The new buzzword, the new whatever. And honestly, and I was one of those people too, just, sitting there thinking like, well, this'll go away. I'm not really going to have to do it. And so I think when PD is presented as a new thing you have to do because of mandates, because of legislative stuff, like no one cared. I didn't care about that as a school psychologist. I cared about things that would make my day go better, right? And yes, I cared about the kids. Of course I do. But as a PD presenter, my audience is not the kids. Do I want it to affect the students? Of course. That's why I do what I do. But really what I want is to keep good people in education because they're leaving.
Okay, you said if you were receiving PD, your motivation would be that you want things to go better.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I can say if I were to walk into a classroom today, particularly an elementary classroom, I know one of the things that people are focusing on now is behavior management.
Mm-hmm.
That would be a stretch for me at this point. So I would say that's an example of something a teacher might want to go better in class.
Yeah. Yeah.
What would be some other motivations that a teacher might have in wanting to learn something in professional development?
Yeah, well, I think, right now in education, it's a tough place to work, right? We have really high burnout rates. We have people leaving the field in droves. It is a hard job. And I want to speak broadly about the term educators. And I love that you use that term instead of teachers, right? Because we're not talking about just teachers. I was a school psychologist. You were a music teacher. And people don't maybe think about a non-classroom, like a general ed classroom teacher, right? So I love the term educator because it really brings in all the different roles, paraprofessionals, principals, school psychologists, social workers, SLPs, like all those different people. So, the burnout rate is super high. It is a very hard job. So if we're asking people to learn new things, it should be things that make their jobs easier, because when their jobs are easier, they have more brain space, they have more emotional space, and they can handle the stuff with the kids, right? So everything I do, I say no when people call me and ask for something that I'm like, I don't think that's what teachers need right now. I don't think that's what educators need right now. Like, and I try to maybe share like, what about this, right? This might help. And I think you already hit the big nail on the head, which is behavior. It's
Mm-hmm.
mental health and behavior. Kids are struggling in
Mm-hmm.
schools. There's a lot of biological reasons for
Mm-hmm.
that, where kids are kind of fighting their own biology when
Mm-hmm.
they're sitting in classrooms for 7 hours a day. It's
Well-
not easy for kids to behave and work hard for 7
Mhm.
hours a day. There's a rare kid who can do that.
Well, let me take you a different direction and sticking to andragogy and how adults learn. I'm sure somewhere along the line you've been presented with change and how to affect change. And gosh, I think his name is Lumen. I learned this years ago, and since then I've seen different permutations of this concept. But the first thing in change is to break the habit, present the new approach, and then freeze it in. Or they say unfreeze, introduce the new thing, and then freeze the new behavior in place.
Mm.
Is that an approach that you have used in your professional development to affect change in schools?
Yeah, I think the two major things I talk about when I'm talking about systems change or any change, really, just personal habit change, any of that.
Exactly.
So one is to do it in small bites, right? It's hard to just stop being who you are and be someone else, right? That's very, very hard.
Successive approximations. You're the psychologist.
You are a behavior scientist. That's good. Yeah. So I think small steps is gonna lead to change. But I think the other thing is it's hard to stop doing something, and instead you need to replace it. And I think that's what you're talking about, right? And so I teach about behavior change with students, but it's the same thing for adults. When we want to change a habit, you can't just say, I'm going to stop doing that. You can't really. It's hard to just stop and replace it with nothing. What you can do is replace it with a different action.
Mm-hmm.
And so all of the training that I do is very practical. It's all about, here's how to do it. Here's what it looks like and sounds like. Let's try it. And so that is a way to replace habits that maybe we all learn habits that, both personally and professionally, that may not always serve us, right?
All
and
right,
sometimes
so-
we have to say, I got to change this habit.
Yeah, I can fully appreciate that. Well, let's dig deeper into successive approximations. Of course, we know Pavlov's dogs, and now I can't remember the psychologist who introduced us to classical conditioning and operant conditioning. Oh, I'm not getting it right now. But operant
There's many, but yes. Anyway, keep going. Yeah.
Operant conditioning is where we have successive approximations. That implies that there are rewards along the way for each successive approximation. So what role does an administrator play in affecting change, particularly regarding successive approximations?
Yeah, I mean, so I think, wow, you brought up a lot of good, interesting stuff to talk about. So I think the rewards is an important point to pause on, because I love that you made that connection, because what I want for participants who are receiving my guidance, my training, the reward is in it working, right? Because if it works, their day goes smoother, the students are more successful, they're less exhausted at the end of the day. That's truly what I'm trying to do in every single training. I really, like I said to you before, I'll say no if a district calls me and says, like, can you teach them this, teach them about what things should, like compliance-based things, right? Like what should go on an IEP. I do that kind of training, but I do it with the lens of, this is going to make it easier for you. This formula is going to make your day go faster, so you have more time to do other things, you have more energy for the children, right? So I'm always trying to find that pot of gold at the end of the training that people say, oh, thank goodness we had this today, because now life is easier, life is better. And I think if administrators are, hiring someone for PD or designing a PD themselves or whatever, think about the pot of gold. What is the pot of gold that teachers are going to say, that educators are going to say, thank you. Like, this is, wow, this is working. This is good. And can you please everyone in a session? Of course, like there's going to be people who are like, that didn't, no, whatever. That's always going to happen.
Well, let's go back to that pot of gold.
Yeah.
We live in an age where, what's the word? Delayed gratification. Delayed gratification is a tough road to hoe. How do you get people to hang on?
Yeah.
In light of delayed gratification.
Yeah. It's a good point. I think, the research on PD says that when we do one and done trainings, not much happens, right? But when we have training that is accompanied by feedback and follow up and support, we see behavior change. We see practice changes that actually help, and they help. And I always am coming from the perspective of, I want to help the educators themselves feel less stress during the day. And then of course I want that to trickle down to the students and have the success impact there.
Now, in your bio, you said you shift from theory to action so they can see real results. How do you do that?
Yeah. So I think it's all about the practicality. And I think as I start, at the beginning talked about, where did instructional design go when we hold teachers accountable for that. And then we say, well, whatever, we just have this person knows stuff, so they're going to come talk to us about it. But that's not enough. You really have to be well versed in instructional design, because I think of that, like, I'm a teacher when I have 100 educators sitting in front of me, and I hold myself accountable for practicality, relevance, rigor, connection, engagement, all of those things. And I'm not trying to say, I'm sure there are a lot of other PD presenters who do it well, but I think we all know there are a lot that don't, and they know their content well, but they don't know how to present it in a way that hooks people, that they say, you know what, I want to pay attention. Like, think about Mari 20 years ago, sitting in the back of the cafeteria, bored to tears. They could have hooked me, right? And now I don't know if I said this whole sentence, but I take some responsibility for that. It wasn't super mature of me at the beginning of my career, but I also put a lot of onus on the presenters and the administrators who were hiring those people and not really vetting them to say, what's your instructional design like? How are you going to hook the audience? Because sometimes educators are a tough audience. We are, right?
Of course.
Because we're exhausted and we don't have time. We do not have time or patience for the nonsense PD, right? And I want not only content experts in whatever they're supposed to be training us, of course, I want them to know that, but I also want them to be good instructors.
And that's where the engagement comes in. All right, absolutely. We have 4 bullets. Where should we go next?
Let's see. How about I'm gonna jump to the last one, then we can well, you know what, let's do a fun one. Let's talk about what everyone hates about PD. That's you gotta what did you hate about PD when you were sitting in an audience? Like, I'll give you a couple to start and you tell me what else goes on the list. So like people who come with their slides and just read off the slides. People hate that. They hate that. They hate I think people hate dorky icebreakers, right? And I really believe in human connection, and I think part of working with people is getting to know them, but I don't think you have to do it in like a cheesy, embarrassing way. I know people sometimes when I go in, educators will say to me, like, are you doing any role plays? Because they're terrified that I'm going to cold call them and do something embarrassing and make them like act something out or whatever. I cannot tell you how many people have said to me, please don't do role plays.
So what's their objection to doing role plays?
I think people just don't like to be embarrassed or feel, I don't know, like it's juvenile or something. I don't know. But I just find that's and honestly, I guess I have the same thing. And I shared with you personally that I used to be a, performer, like I was a theater kid, and so you wouldn't think that kind of stuff would embarrass me. But I'll tell you, I just went to a 2-day training recently, and I still go to trainings all the time and try to learn new things. And I at the beginning of the training was like, oh, these people they're gonna do it. Oh, they're gonna do it. Oh, yep. And then they did. And we had to go around and say stuff and whatever. And I was like, And I don't know the why. I don't
Well,
know
is
why.
that not engagement?
I didn't like it. I don't know what to tell you. I guess, yes, people were engaged, but here's what I think part of it is. I don't have a fear of public speaking. This is what I do for a living. So I have that inside me, but it is one of the like top fears of adults is public speaking. And so I think even though, I don't think people go into education thinking I'm going to be a public speaker, even though that is exactly what teaching is, but you're in front of children. So I guess it has a different feel. You're the leader by default, but in front of other adults, I think people get nervous and embarrassed and just don't want to look silly in front of their colleagues. And so that's what I find people really hate when it's, that the embarrassing stuff, I guess, the role play and the, I don't know, cheesy stuff like that. I just think a lot of people don't like it. I'm sorry, one more.
What else do people hate about PD?
Yeah. And then I think the other category is things that just are not helpful, right? Things that are just don't feel super relevant to the moment. Like they've got, their classrooms on fire half the time, right? I mean, they are stressed people. And then we're sitting there talking about like, something that just doesn't feel like when your house is on fire, you're not super worried about this, theoretical thing in the future. You're worried about your house on fire, right? So I think it has to be PD that we do has to be relevant for today's classroom. And I think when we do PD, that's the kind of traditional style of a presenter to the whole group. Well, where's the differentiation in that, right? How do we make sure that it's relevant to, me as a school psychologist and you as a music teacher, and also the third grade teacher sitting over here, and also the 10th grade teacher sitting on the other side of the room, if it happens to be a district PD.
Okay, let's talk about differentiation. I've got a book here about differentiated instruction for learners. Teachers are learners as well.
Yep.
Educators are learners as well.
Yeah.
How do you differentiate it when you know that if you're speaking to a group of people, you get some who are beginners and others who are veterans?
Absolutely.
How do you differentiate?
Yeah. So I find that the style that works best for me and other people, and I would actually love to hear others work on this as well. But what works best for me, especially when I'm doing a large group like that, where there's all different roles and all different, they work with all different levels, is I differentiate within the activities. So I might say, okay, we're going to learn we'll just talk about like behavior management strategy. Say that's like in my wheelhouse. So I'll say, okay, we're going to learn about a particular strategy. And, I'll do a little bit of theory so they understand the why. And then I talk about the strategy and I'll give a couple examples. And usually what I do is give kind of an elementary example and then a high school example, if I'm, again, with a wide range of age groups there. And then I do a lot of like teach and then activity,
Mm-hmm.
so that in the activity, what I guide them through is, okay, so for your role, what's the language you're going to use? And they've already heard a couple of examples for me at maybe a younger level and an older level. And then in the activity, maybe it's a table activity, chatting with your colleagues or whatever. And I always give some sort of like action planner so they can, that's part of learning theory is we don't just learn from hearing. We have to do, you have to put pen to paper. You have to engage your own brain in it. If you just listen, it might feel nice, but it's going to go away eventually or pretty quickly. And so people need to engage. And so that's how I differentiate is through the activities. I say, okay, now given your role, how would you say it? How would you approach the student with that thought or that, how would you say it, whether it's a third grader or a 10th grader that you're working with, how would you differentiate? So I find that helps engagement because people don't just want to listen. They want to do, they want to, get their hands dirty with their own work, with their own stuff.
Now, Marty, that almost is like akin to role play because you're asking them to take something that you presented to them and apply it to their own situation. And now, do you ask them to speak out to the entire audience of how they would apply that?
I think that really depends. I think the difference is, right, I hear what you're saying, but I think the difference is I was talking about like role playing being like, in an embarrassing way, you have to kind of get up and like pretend. Okay. I'm not asking anyone to like pretend. I'm asking them to reflect on, okay, if you're in your classroom and I've just taught you about this, like I have a strategy that I call the rule of one, which means, I'll just tell you what it is briefly for my example. The rule of one says that's just something I coined, but just means when students are escalated, they need to see one adult face, hear one adult voice, and receive one adult message. Mm-hmm. And what this does is stops other adults from like messing with your moment with a student, which happens all the time. And I actually created this when I was a school administrator and I was accidentally re-escalating kids by trying to help. Right. So I would walk by a classroom and a teacher and a student were standing outside the classroom. I could tell kind of engaged in a moment, right? Like, oh, something's not going well. And I would talk to the student and I would say, hey, what's going on? I just saw you and you were fine. What's happening here? And it would like start all over again. Right. And so I created the rule of one, which means I would look at the adult and say, Dr. Johnson, can I help? And you could say, no, thank you. And that rule of one, you did not give me your power, so I'm out of there. Right. But if you say, yes, please, that would be so nice. Please help. Now you have to pass me your message. You have to tell me, right? So anyway, that's the rule of one. And Now you're going to have to help me back. Why was I telling you about the rule of one? Oh God, that's embarrassing.
We were talking
What was your
about.
question? That's embarrassing.
Oh, well, anyway, I'm looking at the clock and we probably better move on.
Oh, all right.
So we talked about
last night embarrassing moment because I took too far of a bird walk and now I'm like, what was the point I wanted to
no
I told
worries,
you.
my friend, no worries.
All right. Well, anyway,
so-
that's a cool. That was a good. I'll just make it make sense. That is an example. I'll bring it. I'm going to make it make sense here. That is an example of a strategy where I might teach that strategy, right? But then I say, okay, so now I'm going to give everyone I would, teach a little more about it, but I would give everyone a few moments to on their action planner say, okay, so if I am in my classroom, how am I going to, pass my message if Dr. Johnson walks by my room and says, do you need help? Like, what is it that I would say? And so I don't see it as, I'm back. I don't see it as role play. I see it as reflection, right? And so they're doing the work that they really need that will help them, as opposed to the embarrassing part of role play, which is like, pretending. And this isn't pretend. This is what real life. What are you going to do tomorrow when you're trying to use the rule of one or any of the other strategies?
I see. And, actually, we should have another conversation regarding this. I've got a list of things regarding andragogy, and these could go very deep, but we better move on.
Okay.
All right. So where would you like to go next? We have only a few minutes remaining.
All right. Well, let's talk about some of the components of PD that would really help, especially, administrators to know as they're designing PD or hiring people for PD, what would actually help create lasting change. And so I think I'm going to go back to the word connection, just one of my favorite words because it's, used in all kinds of places here. But people need the connection to what they're already doing. So it doesn't feel like, because there's not a lot new. I mean, we are humans. We've all been learning for all of these, millions of years. Like there's not a lot new, but sometimes when we roll things out, we love a new name, we love a new title, we love a new acronym, but sometimes that's not the right way to do it. Let's talk about, I'll talk about restorative practices as kind of a, not necessarily a buzzword, but it's a phrase that's been not always here, right? But is it really different than kind of understanding the whole child and doing logical discipline and things like that? I don't really think so. I think if we dig into these things that are new phrases or new buzzwords, we can find the connection to what we already know and do. And I think that really helps educators to say, oh, okay, this is not a new, shiny thing. This is understanding what I already do in a way that maybe will be a little more helpful. And here are some specific strategies to do with it. So I think connection to what we're already doing, connection to things like I leaned on before, things that will make our jobs easier because they're hard jobs. I think, I'll bring back up that pot of gold idea, right? Thinking about when you're thinking about bringing PD in for your staff, think about that pot of gold. Is this just we have to? If it's we have to, think deeper, because there will be a connection to something that's helpful for educators and they need it.
Now, Marty, let me go back for a moment. Connecting it to something we already know or something we already do.
Mm-hmm.
A buzzword we hear frequently is fidelity.
Mm-hmm.
If we do it as it fits our particular method or approach, what does that do for fidelity?
Yeah, I guess it depends on the thing that we're talking about, right? Because you're absolutely right that, fidelity is important when we're talking about, maybe curriculum implementation in a certain way, or, but I think fidelity, the important part of that is feasibility, right? Feasibility for me often trumps fidelity, because if we can't do it, if it's not practical, if it's not possible, there's no way we're going to have fidelity, right? It really has to be, again, back to that connection, right? It has to be connected to what's possible in our current role, in our current classroom, with our current students.
Marty, this has been a fascinating conversation, and obviously we have much more that we could say.
I feel like we just got started. We might have to circle back to each other at some point.
That's right, and I promised you that we would have a stimulating conversation, and we most certainly did.
Yeah.
So, given all of the topics that we discussed, and even those we have not yet discussed, what would be the takeaway you'd like people to have?
Sure. So I think, for educators, advocate for PD that you need and want. That's what I would say to educators. Advocate, because maybe maybe you'll be the one to think of the thing that your colleagues need, right? The things that you need. If you feel like you need it, someone else probably needs it too. And to our administrators, I think, and I'm coming again from both of those perspectives, having spent a long time in administration, I think about that pot of gold. Think about how can I support? You want to keep your staff, you want to keep good people who know how to do good things, right? And so I think that's the job of leaders, is to find those pots of gold and bring those in. I think practicality, feasibility, and don't just hire content experts, hire people who will talk to you about instructional design. If you're calling a PD presenter and they're uncomfortable talking to you about their instructional design, then they don't know instructional design. And I just think
what's your call to action then?
So I think, I mean, obviously I work all around the country, so I'd love to hear from districts, but I'm not the only one, right? I'm not the only one, but vet your presenters, make sure that they want to know about your audience. They want to know what you're already doing, what you've already done. If they're not asking questions, but taking your money, I think keep looking, right? Or ask the right questions. Yeah.
And if people want to know more, how do they contact you?
Yeah. So I would love to hear from any districts anywhere in the country. I do lots of virtual training, and also my daughter just graduated high school, so I am free to travel. So happy to come in person as well. And we have an awesome team at PD Monster. So everything can be found on our website, pdmonster.com, and our email address is on the screen there, info@pdmonster.com. You can reach me directly there. I do have a team, but you can certainly find me and be happy to talk to anyone about the things that we do. The best way to find out what PD Monster is really good at, we really do come from a kind of behavioral mental health lens, and a lot of the PD we do is in that arena, is on our website under our live webinars. Not that the webinar is the only way to learn something, we'd be happy to contract directly, but that gives you a good, if you kind of look at all the webinar topics we do, it just gives you a good insight into what we're really good at.
Well, Marty, it's been fun speaking with you. And thank you for being our guest today. This was a great conversation. Marty Wrightington, PhD. She's not in Waterford, Connecticut, but she is still indeed the founder and CEO of PD Monster. Thank you for being our guest today. And I would be remiss if I did not acknowledge my friend and colleague, Cassandra Williams, who is the brains behind Educational Innovation 360 Degrees. And she allows us to use her channel on YouTube and Facebook and all of the various places where she posts. And those are the services that Cassandra offers, as well as the services that I, David Johnson, through Transform Ed Consulting, offer. And you can find us on LinkedIn, or you can find us in on the internet as well. So it's been a pleasure in this conversation, and I'm glad we all were here and had a good time doing it. See you next time.